May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free of economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Today we're going to have another couple of pieces from a work in progress, Tassajara Stories, the early years with Shunryu Suzuki. Today's are called Line and Noah. And you will find out what the line is and who Noah is right after we have our pause to meditate. So when you hear the bell, hit pause if you wish. And you can meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause. And we'll be here to hit the bell and get going on these latest Tassajara stories. Line. I'd like to make a ring down to a toll station. Tassajara Springs, number 1. Mark other, plus 408, plus 181. I was at Fred's camp at night, having spent the day walking the entire 10 miles of the phone line. I checked it from the box where it connects to Pac Bell, and it was okay from there, but I wanted to call from a regular phone to make sure. Like in case there was a bad connection at the box. And that's what I had learned to say to an operator. I'd like to make a ring down to a toll station. Tassajara Springs, number 1, mark other, plus 408, plus 181. Tassajara Springs, number 1. But to get it, you had to dial 0 and talk to an operator. And it could take a while if you didn't know just what to say. And then they'd put you through, and I'd hope it wasn't busy. There was one line for all those people. Dialing from Tassajara, one would crank the phone box, wait for a toll operator, and give them the number you wanted to call. The phone line was out. Peter asked me to go check it out. I got a backpack with a few tools and the portable crank phone, followed it from the office downstream looking for a break or a ground. The creek had to be crossed 4 times to get to the Narrows, and I didn't want to slip into any of it as it was cold out. And the creek was high, but unless it was killer high, it could always be crossed somehow. A sycamore had fallen and served as the last crossing for years, balancing over it with a cold-flowing creek below. Before the Narrows, there's a small creek that comes down from the horse pasture. The line follows a trail that goes up there. Hooked up the phone with the line and cranked it. Got an answer in the office. I do that occasionally just to make sure and keep in touch, even though I was close to positive the problem lay further on. Went up another mile or so to the horse pasture trail, followed it to the wide expanse, distant mountains visible, the path curving around the mountainside, the line swaying unbroken across a couple 100 yards to the other side ahead. The problem lay somewhere in the 8 or so miles forward. Returned to Tassajara to prepare for a longer haul. Usually at that point in the discovery process, I'd load up the Trailblazer and drive to Fred's camp, test it there and hope it was our problem so I could stay away from the Tassajara schedule and be in the woods. If it was Pac Bell's problem, I'd let them know, forget it, and eat a bunch of food we didn't have, like a hamburger, and maybe drink a beer or 2 or 3. If the problem was on our end, I'd drive to the horse bridge, which was about in the middle of the 10-mile run, and test which way it was out, if not both. After that, just walking and keeping the line in view, sometimes in rough terrain, but always wonderful in its remoteness from any hint of civilization. I couldn't drive to Fred's camp or the horse bridge this time as the road was out due to storms, slides, down trees, deep snow on top. Had to walk it, keeping my eye on the line. More than could be done in a day if the ground or break was far. My Dane buddy Nils came along to carry the pack of gear to the creek crossing before the horse bridge. He had incredible balance and walked with a heavy pack on the log crossing the creek. Noah, the dirty, blonde, medium-build, slight-framed Tassajara dog, came with us. The creek was too swift and rough there for him to cross, so Niels carried him across that log next. Noah loved all people and dogs. Never barked at a human or canine guest that came in, but Noah enthusiastically tried to kill anything else, small or large. Once saw him take on a 10-point buck at Grasshopper Flats. Nancy Lay had brought Noah in from Big Sur. When she left, he stayed. In time, Noah got sort of confused from not having one main person to relate to. He slept in my room with me for months, and I loved it. But one evening he didn't show, and that was the end of it. Went to someone else's for a while. He was an orphan with too many parents. Now, we 3 stopped to rest and drink water. I only brought a small container, as I'd fill it from the creek. Nowadays, people aren't supposed to drink from creeks because of Giardia. I hadn't heard of it back then. Nils unloaded the heavy backpack and sighed. Noah was barking not far off. I looked up at the sun and figured it was about 10 in the morning. Nils opened the pack and started questioning the wisdom of bringing each item which I defended as necessary. Bolt cutter? Might need 'em, and if I do, there they are. He grunted and kept looking. Wire cutters, electrician's pliers, pruning saw, hatchet, hammer, nail, screwdriver, flashlight, and extra batteries, snakebite kit, burner for heating water with a small pan, some rice, miso, green tea, change of clothes, basic H, liquid soap, extra line and rope attached to the outside trail mix, and insulators. People collect old insulators. A guest in the summer had offered me money to take down our old ones and replace them with new ones. I said, maybe next year. A goddamn come-along. He held it up and looked at me in wonderment. I might have to tighten the line. You could do that without it. You can make a come-along with the rope that will do anything this will. I was going to question that, but Noah's barking and an eerie cry got our attention. Look, Nils called out in his urgent voice. Noah, got a deer. I could see through the trees uphill Noah's teeth and a small deer's front legs. The deer cried out like a baby. Noah lunged for its neck. Pathetic cries continued. We yelled at Noah to stop and ran up, but it was all over. A young doe, some blood. Noah was panting. Unconcerned with our objections, he lay down. We stood there in silence, finally broken by me. Well, what are we going to do with the deer? What do you mean? We leave it here. Do you plan to have it for dinner? Well, someone should. And how are you going to get it to them? Well, I'll carry it. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I kept insisting. He kept calling me stupid. We trudged on, Nils with the pack on his shoulders, me with the dough over mine. David Chadwick, you are completely crazy, man. I couldn't leave it, I said. You know how many animals are dying all the time everywhere, all over the woods? You want to carry them too, huh? This one is our responsibility, I said. Noah kills every day. Noah is not a Buddhist. Noah's religion is killing. You should follow Noah into the woods every day and carry back all the animals he kills. It wasn't that bad. We went on another half hour, then, here's Tassajara Creek, Nils said. I corrected him. No, it's called Willow Creek from where they join just above here. Now you've got to carry your new friend across, he said, as I laid the deer down. The creek in winter after strong rains could kill you where it's narrow. But downstream near the horse bridge where the trail meets the creek, it's wide and can be crossed with some effort. And no matter how easy it is to maneuver, in winter it's cold as heck. Earlier that practice period, a bunch of students came in that way in January because the road was out. The water was much lower at that time as it was before the early spring rains. Nils had done the heavy lifting up to now. The dead doe I'd carried that far didn't count. I put my clothes on a rock next to my Red Wing boots, handed one end of the rope to Nils, walked the bank upstream as far as it would let me. I stepped naked into the creek and gasped, then up to my knees and gasped again. The next step sank me in above the waist, and I screamed involuntarily. You sound like you're having an orgasm, he called out. I couldn't make a snappy retort as I was hyperventilating. I struggled and stumbled, but didn't fall down. Trying to go straight across, got to the other bank opposite where Nell stood. We secured each side, and I went back holding the rope, which made it a lot easier. And it's tight, thanks to your masterful trucker's hitch, I praised. It was for ships long before trucks. It's a Viking knot. That's how he pronounced Viking. Nils took off his clothes, lifted the pack over his head, stepped in the water on the up creek side of the rope so it would push him toward it. He was taller than I, so it hit him hip level. You call this cold? This is like a hot bath compared to a creek in a Danish winter. Nils, it can only get so cold before it's ice, I said. No, in Denmark the water is so used to the cold that it takes another 10 degrees to freeze it. He carried on, and without screaming or exhibiting any difficulty, I followed him with my clothes over my head. Noah jumped in and was swept downstream. We didn't worry. By the time we were both on the other side, Noah came running up to us. I stepped back in. Why are you going back? Nils asked. To get the doe. That's complete crazy. I ignored him and got the deer, which I struggled to get across. Now you are on your own to carry the 90-pound pack and the dead deer, Nils said. And any other dead animals you find. There are probably a lot of dead insects in the bushes you could get. I realized I couldn't go any further with the deer. The Willow Creek Trail was just above the embankment. He brought the pack and I the deer up there. I'll leave it here and tell the rangers, I said. Maybe someone will eat it. It will be eaten for sure, he said, but I bet it's not by people. Okay, I better get going, I said. No, first we must have a coffee break. No coffee, mid-morning tea. He was less excited about that, but settled for second best. We got the burner going, heated some creek water, and shared a cup of matcha. Back to the creek, both still naked. As he crossed, he held on to Noah so he wouldn't be carried away again. We stood on opposing banks, yelling insults at each other while we got our clothes and boots back on. Noah stood by Nils' side, shaking off the water. You're complete crazy, he called out. You're complete Viking, I yelled back. We left the rope there for posterity, which might well include us. Bowed a gasho to the poor little doe corpse, and he carried that heavy pack toward the Arroyo Seco, maybe half a mile. There's a camp with wooden buildings before the horse bridge. It was rented out by the Forest Service. I'd seen it used by scouts at church group and once by the Shire School, whose spring outing there Alan Marlowe and I had once happened upon. We were doing the annual spring cleaning of the line, going along it, clearing branches that imposed on it, reattaching the line to insulators. Sometimes it would be running along the ground for a ways and still be working as long as it wasn't raining hard. The drier the weather, the better it worked. If it was going out when there was rain, we knew to go walking along it till we found where it was down and get it back up. And that was my job for a few years. How wonderful it was. Climbing trees, I learned to smell ants. And if I did, it meant it was infested, and I'd scoot down and leave that one alone. You can learn to smell rattlesnakes too, though I wouldn't trust my nose before my eyes. They aren't aggressive, at least the ones around there, but you don't want to surprise them. We had to climb some to follow the line and knew not to put a hand where we couldn't see. And then there are heights. I've never loved heights, but somehow I've ended up working at them more than I was comfortable with. I got vertigo way up in a tall tree one day and realized I was losing the distinction between gripping and letting go. Slid down that tree in a couple of seconds. I'd always wondered why boys who climb tall water tower ladders sometimes fall to their deaths, and then I knew. Thus, there would be places I'd skip. The line could be touching branches and leaves here and there without any noticeable interference. I did the poison oak places. We had people in Tassajara like Sandy Watkins, whom it seemed got poison oak blisters from the air. People got it from dogs, too. Steve Brown had to be driven to a hospital one morning looking like he'd been stung by 1,000 bees because the day before he'd handled leafless poison oak vines and roots while digging a ditch in the winter. I wasn't real susceptible to poison oak, but respected it. Called it Tassajara Enemy Number 1 and would warn people that you can lose your immunity through contact because it's an allergy. The deer eat it, and I learned that Indians used to eat homeopathic bits in the early spring to build up a tolerance. And we've had students who did that without any bad results. Best not to mess with it, but I had to. I'd cover myself with liquid soap and go into a patch of poison oak, sometimes taller than I am, to get to the line, do the work, then go into the creek and wash my body and clothes in cold water. The soap cut the oil, and the cold water didn't open up the pores. Oh, bees. There's another critter that could keep me out of a tree. Them and wasps. And to someone who was highly allergic, that was the most dangerous possibility. So we kept a syringe with adrenaline in the office first aid kit for such an emergency. It's been used more than once. Alan was tall and strong and usually most talkative, but not on this trip. Wasn't enough energy left for that. For 2 days, we worked our butts off from sunrise to sunset, cooked up some miso soup and brown rice. We'd sit zazen, go to sleep, awaken at the first sign of light, sit, eat the leftover rice and miso, get to work. We were full of energy, charging through a couple of miles of line a day. Then on the 3rd day, we arrived at the horse bridge, where the line crossed the Arroyo Seco River. We could hear children's voices and walked over to the camp. There were people we knew there. The Shire School in San Francisco had rented the facility for their spring outing. The Shire School was the ultimate hippie dream school. Most people today would consider their policies criminal. Actually, most people back then, too. Tony Johansson, an early student of Suzuki's and husband of Tony with an I, was a founder. He greeted us warmly with hugs. As soon as we put our packs down, we were past a joint. Time for a break. It was late afternoon. We'd earned it. At Tassajara, for students, there was no dope, no booze, no meat or fish. With the Shire School teachers, parents, and students, including elementary level, we lay back and enjoyed the music, then feasted on hamburger, cheese, beer, wine, pot, and a nap around the fire. The next morning, we got up late, no time for zazen, ate bacon and eggs and pancakes, coffee instead of green tea, then Back to the line. There was a difference. We'd lost our buoyancy, faded like our batteries were running out. We trudged every small incline and effort, every tree an ordeal. The joy of hard work in the great outdoors had been extinguished. It was the most convincing lesson in the importance of living lightly and minimizing indulgences. There was a movie Sylvester Stallone starred in where he went to the future via cryogenics, and everyone was pure, but also lacking in personal freedom, vitality, and happiness. He taught them how to drink alcohol, smoke cigarettes, and eat rats because there was no beef. The audience is to sympathize with his returning people to the lifestyle he'd known before as the cure for what they were missing in the future. He wouldn't have been so sure about that particular approach, I thought, if he had been with Alan and me on that phone line job. Noah. That first summer I was there, I walked to Big Sur with our dog Noah. It's the hardest 9 miles I ever did. The trail starts upstream from Tassajara past Grasshopper Flats, scouting around the waterfall with a cable to hold on for a short, minimal footing stretch up over the Tony Trail, which a ranger told me was the steepest in the whole huge national forest. Got down to Willow Creek on the other side at about 10 in the morning, sank to my knees and drank desperately from that, and every creek crossed that day hadn't brought water. Young idiot me. Noah lapped it up like crazy as well. I looked up, struck by the experience of being in a place of such remoteness. Had only talked to a few people who'd gone this way. This is the spot where Yvonne, lost and exhausted, wandered up the Willow Creek Trail and met the Tony Trail. I looked for signs of Indians and found an arrowhead on the other side of the hogback, and way away from what seemed to me like anything, did a double take when I caught sight of a heavy iron contraption. Remembered eccentric old Putzie, the ranger who'd been tending to these trails for decades. Said he'd used mules, that there used to be mule trains in these parts with supplies and gear for prospectors. They'd never found any gold to speak of. Told me if we ever do find gold, to hide it, bury it, unless you want the place overrun and torn up. Onward toward the Pacific, through oak-covered valleys and meadows, and up and down, just Noah and me. Got to the ridge, looking down at the ocean as the sky was darkening. I couldn't find a trail down. It got really dark. I found a bit of rope off the trail, tied it to Noah, who led me down blind through brush, down the steep hillside, skirting menacing drop-offs, until gloriously coming to a road. Then down the road to the first light, exhausted, parched, staggering to the door. A tall, thin old man with a white beard answered my knocks. I knew him. It was Dryden Phelps, whom I'd met at Tassajara. He was some sort of Buddhist scholar who'd lived for a long time in China, went there as a Baptist missionary in the 1920s. I stood there just trying not to collapse as he talked on and on to me. Eventually his wife appeared. Who is it? She asked, and after a look at me, oh, you poor dear, come in, have something to drink and eat and rest. She gave Noah food and drink as well. The happiest I saw Noah was when a big, somewhat shaggy dog came wandering in from the woods one day. They got along so well we gave in and relaxed the one dog rule. Noah and that dog shared a passion, killing. They'd go running into the woods and we could hear them barking in the distance and knew what that meant. Sometimes they came back smelling of skunk, sometimes painted in blood. This made us feel uncomfortable to varying degrees. Some people wanted them fenced, felt responsible. A Buddhist monastery bringing a reign of terror to the realm. Sometimes they stayed out for days to come back to sleep and lie around for days. Then one day, Noah returned sad and alone. He'd still go out occasionally by himself. And then one day, Noah didn't come back. After a stretch of time, months I guess, a memorial was held. I returned to Tassajara as head monk in 74, and in 75 I was director. One day I drove over to Fred's camp to check the line connection. I made a phone call from there to Nils, who was married and living with his wife, Maggie Kress, in Muir Beach. He had a carpenter's shop in the city and was making exquisite furniture. Hey, Nils, I said, guess who I ran into? It was Noah. I'd seen him behind a picket fence that went around a white wood slat home. Visited with him a while. He's living with a family. He's happy. I bet he met a hiker and followed him out, Nils said. A few years later, I went with my son Kelly, then about 8, to the Arroyo Seco River and walked and swam upstream through the pools and narrow canyons, sometimes a couple of yards in between the walls. National Geographic quality. Got to the waterfall with the rope coming down on the side. Not high falls, maybe 15 feet, but I never got further. As we rested in the circular concave confines of the pool below the falls, I told Kelly I discovered that place on an all-day walk with his mother and then returned there on a day off with Nils, Tim Buckley, Alan Marlowe, Tim Aston, and Jerry Fuller. We brought bag lunches, left at sunrise before breakfast in the Zindo. After a quick munch of gruel and soybeans on the deck outside the kitchen, we walked downstream all the way to the Arroyo Seco. What a trip. It takes longer that way. Swimming through pools, jumping rocks, walked and swam all the way up to that waterfall, stopping to leap off cliff sides into deep pools. It was getting too late to try to go further. Nils showed us how easy it was by climbing to the top of the falls and jumping in. When our group got back to the creek, the sky was already getting dark. We went up creek fast as we could. There was a moon waxing near full, but most of its light was shielded by the trees and the steep rise on each side. Got so dark we could hardly see anything. Tim Buckley told us about being at a get-together at Gary Snyder's place in Nevada City, where Snyder got everyone running in the woods in the dark, not colliding with trees by grace of subtle sensing. So we did the same, ran onward on the smooth creek stones, sometimes leaping, zagging and zigging, arriving back at Tassajara too late for evening zazen. Soaked in the hot plunge till the fire watch with her clackers came in to turn off the kerosene lamps and kick us out. The next day, none of us could understand how we'd done that with no one falling. Back to Kelly and me around 1981. On the way out the Arroyo Seco River, we stopped by Fred's camp to say hello to Noah. A woman came out in the yard and told us what I'd expected, that Noah had died a couple of years back. He was getting old, she said. Lay around a lot. One day, he didn't get up, stopped eating. He's buried in the yard over there. I thanked her, gave a bow, and we drove back to the Bay Area. So that is Noah and the line. That last part, one thing I've thought about is some of these things where I say what happened later. I have to decide whether to include the later stuff with each piece, and especially with people, or I have the idea to have at the end, like a long epilogue or whatever, telling what happened later. I think that'd be better. And I do have a couple of the pieces divided into back then and later. But I don't know. We'll see. I've got a great picture of Noah. Let me see if we can find it. If we go to Cuke.com, write Noah, N-O-A-H, in the site search box on the home page. And yep, Noah, our dog in the early days. Yep, there's a picture of Noah taken by Don D'Angelo, who was Donnie Crockett back then. It's great. Yeah, I think, there's part of that final bit. The final bit there is later on, right? Kelly and me going back. But then in the middle of that, we go back to Tassajara, talking about how I discovered that that incredible walk up creek on Arroyo Seco River, upriver, sort of between a creek and a river. It's pretty good swimming holes in it, though. Anyway, I think I could take that part out where Diane and I discovered on a walk, and then I go up creek with all these guys. And that could just be a short piece talking about that, right? And then later we could have this, the bit about Kelly and me going up and doing that, just in the postscript and the epilogue and the whatever, and then finding out that Noah had died. And then I could put the part about Noah being alive. Back when I was director, I could put that in. See, it gets complicated, right? Well, we'll see. At some point, I've got to stop everything and just work on this and see what comes up. The easiest thing would just be to leave all this together as it is. But then I would end that piece, and I think this would only be in an epilogue, with the only person in that story of who went to the Arroyo Seco of all those guys, the only one who's still alive is me. And I think I just heard Nils calling out. And we're waiting for you, David Chadwick. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Dogette Bandita, Feline Kachita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you, and yours, and all of us, a grand awakening.